Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Andrew McCormick. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a single art teacher out there that is 100% okay with their budget. Even the most fortunate and flush teacher out there, probably, someone who has a big old fat yearly budget, could probably come up with a list of a few new materials or some new items that they'd love to have in their classroom. We all need and want more stuff for our students than our budgets can provide. Then we've all heard or even lived the horror story of having about $1 or less per student per year to spend on art supplies. The way around both these issues is really to have an open door policy for accepting donations from parents and other community members. We as art teachers are notorious for being kind of weird and zany, and we can really make magic and gold out of anything, out of junk. We'll write those weird, zany emails asking for any number of cryptic stuff that our parents might just have lying around. Hey, anybody out there got a bunch of pool noodles or PVCs they're not using? I wrote that one not too long ago. Anybody got some Pringle cans, like 40 of them? And then there's always that one day out of the blue where you just get this weird, big pile of junk dropped off by some really well-intentioned parent. Now, maybe you really do have a use for all those foot-long strips of leftover purple vinyl. Or maybe that stuff is just going to be pure garbage and it's really a bigger pain in the butt to have to deal with that stuff. Do you even have room for all the donated materials that people are trying to give you? Do you really want all that old, junky house paint? Do you say no, or do you run the risk of looking ungrateful if you do that? Seriously, with donated materials, you can strike it rich or simply strike out. So to help me figure out how to sort through some of the dilemma of free donations is Art Ed Radio's second favorite podcast host, Tim Bogatz. Sometimes Tim and I joke that I'm a bit of a hoarder, but it's just a joke, and it really is important for teachers to think about their stance on donations. How do you get them? How do you store them? How do you ask for them? One of the things I love about getting weird and unusual donations is it forces students and teachers to look at things and differently and to think about them differently. When you get a big old pile of weird stuff, you and your students have to think creatively about what you can do with that. How can that be turned into art? This is a great skill for students to develop that they really don't get to try out and flex if the teacher is always designing all the projects for them at the beginning of the term. All people benefit from being responsive and adaptive. And what better way to demonstrate this to our students than taking a big old pile of rubbish and turning it into artistic gold? So as we get into how unexpected materials can drive new projects and ideas, it makes me wonder about how we as art teachers plan our curriculum. Are we leaving enough space for new projects to come to life as we respond to new materials and ideas? Are we allowing for student choice as we develop our curriculum? One of the great ways to think about allowing for space and flexibility is by checking out AOE's class, Designing Your Art Curriculum. The curriculum class is a really great hands-on class that, like all AOE classes, lets you learn alongside other great inquisitive art teachers. One of the things I've loved about this class is it allows you to design tools to implement a curriculum that best fits your teaching styles and the needs of your students. So head on over to theartofed.com and check out this course and all the other great classes under the Courses tab. All right, so let's bring on Tim to see if he can help me make sense of my big open door policy and random piles of weirdness as I accept all these free will donations. All right, Tim, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's really important to think about, how we use those donations. And I thought you'd be a good one to bring on because I know sometimes we joke that I'm Mr. Messy and you're Mr. Clean. Yeah. So I kind of want to hear your take on accepting junk from people, especially for an art room that's really, really underfunded. That stuff can be super, super important. So where are some of your go-to favorite avenues for getting some of those donations?
Oh, man, I have a lot of them. And I think, honestly, part of that just comes from, teaching for a while and just learning to accept like all the crap that people are trying to dump off on you. Like, oh, it's the art room. They can use it. And so you kind of have to learn, what you want. But, over the course of getting that experience, I definitely found a few kind of go-to things that I really like. I love cardboard in all forms because it works so well for sculpture and so well for painting and sometimes even for drawing, and you can do all sorts of stuff with it. It's so versatile. So I love cardboard, and you can get a lot of it donated, but if you're ever running short, you can always go to grocery stores or like your box stores, Walmart, Target, whatever you have around, and ask them for donations too, and they almost always have just a ton of cardboard. So I would always just take my wife's SUV and just like drive to Target, and like they got to know me because I'm just always going to stop in and take all their cardboard from them, and that's always helpful. I love hardware stores. A lot of times they'll have all kinds of old stuff that they will donate to you for sculpture, and especially like paint stores, like they have mist tints or just other paint that may be getting old, house paint, whatever it may be, that they'll be happy to give to you or sell to you at like a really, really cheap discount. And, those are always some really, really good places to go, and you can get a lot out of that. So, anytime I can find cardboard or house paint, those are kind of my two go-to things. So whatever stores I can get to for those, are definitely my favorites.
Mm-hmm. But then there's always this like, what I do is like I put out an all call just like all the time to like parents on a website, on, news blasts, emails to parents, people in the school. And it helps out, okay, I need a bunch of bags because we're doing ceramics. I need a bunch of cardboard, I need a bunch of this. But then sometimes it's like, hey, here's a bunch of horrible, horrible crap. And by the way, it's rancid and it's toxic. So, how do you avoid kind of filling up your room with all that junk? How do you really make sure you're getting what you want?
Oh, I feel like it's kind of your job as the teacher to sort through it. Like, no matter what level you're at, whether you're teaching elementary, high school, whatever, like you're going to get crap that you do not want and do not need. But I never want to say no to that. And I think we've talked about this before, but I just always feel like if you're going to get donations, you really don't want to say no to anything, because then those donations might dry up. Like you might stop getting things if you keep rejecting everything people try and give you. So I always say yes to everything and then just kind of sort through it. And so usually I have three piles. Like I have the pile of, yes, we can use this. I have the pile of maybe someday, and you just got to make sure that doesn't get too big. And we can talk about that a little bit later. But then you have the pile of, oh God, we're never going to use this. And I try and get rid of that stuff as soon as I possibly can. So I'll accept it, be like, thank you so much, I appreciate the donation. I'll write them a thank you note later and all that good stuff. And then as soon as they're gone, I just take it back out to the dumpster and get rid of it. And you really need to do that. Like if you know that you're not going to use stuff, it needs to get out of there as soon as possible. Otherwise you're going to end up with just this clutter, this mess, and just a lot of stuff that you won't ever need and won't ever use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I do kind of a similar thing. Sometimes I do. I don't know. There's been a couple times where I've just had to tell certain people, like, okay, on the fourth try of you trying to give me something, I really appreciate it, but like, no, I don't want that. I cannot use it. And I haven't really had the instance where, then it stops coming around. Like people still kind of ask me if I want stuff and will take stuff. And you end up I know I have a reputation kind of everywhere I go with sending out like kooky, weird emails. Like, hey, if you got any old trophies or taxidermied animals or broken musical instruments, and they're like, what the crap are you doing in there? But then people, like when they're cleaning out their house or, downsizing, they're like, man, I bet the art teacher could use this. So I've gotten just some like straight up weird stuff. Maybe we can talk about that later. But, there's the mainstay. There's like everyone gives you yogurt containers and plastic bags and the cardboard and the, stuff like that. But do you ever get something that's kind of like woo, banner day. I got this donated. I mean, you got some stories about getting some really cool, crazy stuff that got y'all excited?
Oh, I don't know if I've ever gotten anything that's just really, really thrilling, but I kind of like the problem solving aspect of things where people give you stuff like you said, the broken musical instruments and the old trophies. And you have to figure out, or you have to work with your kids to figure out exactly how you can use those. Like if they're in the maybe someday pile, I love to let kids look through there and say, oh, hey, we could do this. We could put this together to make this, and just let kids kind of attack that and really develop some of their sort of creative thinking, some of their problem solving skills to kind of, put things together in a new way. And so, I'm always excited, like I said, when I get that cardboard, when I get house paint, things like that, that really kind of help my budget. But I also like the challenge of getting some new things and figuring out exactly what to do with them. So I think if you look at it that way, if you look at it as kind of a challenge, then, you can get excited about the possibilities of things that maybe you wouldn't know what to do with otherwise.
I had a day a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, where late one night, it was like on a Thursday, I'd been in contact. This is a good source for people out there who are into collage and two-dimensional stuff. I had contacted a comic book shop and I'd said, I know that sometimes you guys can return comic books that don't sell or get beat up and they get dinged and you can return them back to the vendor and get like credit back. Well, they can have boxes and boxes and boxes of comic books and the vendor doesn't want to pay for the shipping to send that stuff back. So what a lot of comic stores will do is they'll rip off the cover, mail the cover back to the vendor as proof of like, I could not sell this comic book. Yeah. And then the rest of that comic book, they have to throw away. Okay. So this is about 3 weeks ago, I scored about 500 pounds worth of comic books, like just boxes and boxes and boxes of comic books. And I mean, it was really cool, but then I actually was able to return the favor and email some of the teachers in the district like, hey, I have like 20 boxes of comic books, like just hundreds and hundreds of comic books. Like, does anyone want them? And I was able to get rid of a few of them. But then the very next day, I emailed the building's family consumer science teacher and said, do you have an old food chopper or something? I've got all this old glaze I need to reconstitute. I'm not kidding, man. She came through with 5 really nice blenders. Just like, here you go. Yeah. They had, kind of gotten some new ones and these were all the old ones. And I was like, this is amazing. And again, I think I kept 3 and I gave 2 down to some of the other high schools and elementary schools, kind of the same thing. So it is always nice when you feel like you kind of win the lottery with free stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. So do you have, in the years of teaching, we always get these weird donations, and has there been a project that's come out that you're just like, man, that project never could have happened if it wouldn't have been for these weird projects? Just a really memorable project that you've done with donated stuff?
Yeah, I have one that was actually really cool. This was a long time ago, probably my second or third year of teaching high school, but I had hit up our local newspaper for any old paper, newsprint, whatever that they may have. And they came through with just this huge roll of paper, like this, 1,000-foot roll of newsprint, which I thought was really amazing. And so I was starting to just cut it up into smaller pieces. And one of my kids was like, we should do a giant drawing with that. And so we did. And I had this huge room when I was teaching. I mean, it's like 100 feet long, which is amazing in its own right. But we were able to just lay out this 50-foot piece of paper, and just my kids would work collaboratively on it when, they had some downtime. They'd come in after school and just kind of doodle and sketch on it, and other kids would come in and color it. And it just turned into this 50-foot long cartoon drawing that was just filled with all sorts of random crap. But, none of the drawings were great, but it just looks so cool. And I love the collaborative aspect of it. And, we developed something really, really nice out of there, which, we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise if I hadn't got that donation. But so I don't know. What about you? Have you come up with anything really amazing with your, half a ton of comic books or anything else like that?
Well, the half a ton of comic books, I just kind of like leaving around for, like I said, collage. And I do a lot of drawings based on collage where the kids will build a collage and then we scale it up and redraw it and stuff. Kind of gets them out of the I must draw photorealistically, vein. But I think one of my favorite projects, and I haven't done it this year yet because I'm trying to figure out how to rebuild my stash of stuff, is I kind of did like a whole unit, a couple projects on steampunk. So, something that looks futuristic-y, science fiction-y, but yet looks old and vintage. And I would just have, bins and bins, like the big old like totes from like Walmart filled with old computers and typewriters and VCRs and just junk that people would donate. Like, oh, I heard you wanted old crap, old electronic junk. And the really fun part of that was the actual like taking things apart. Like, so when we would start these units, and maybe it was a mask, or maybe it was kind of whatever they wanted to do. Maybe we would do kind of a zombie head, and there would be like steampunky gears and wires and stuff in it. The biggest kick the kids got out of it was actually like taking all that stuff apart. Yes. And there's, I don't know, maybe it's like kind of reverse engineering, but it's like, oh, this is how a VCR works, or this is how, an old radio works. And they're like taking it apart and they're smashing it and they're using tools. And, it's like the most fun that they would have throughout the whole thing. And I think it's very physical. And then we would just collect these things. And what I really liked about it, and maybe you can kind of talk about this, is like, I felt like in that project, kids were doing something that they weren't doing in other art projects, which was they were looking at something that already had a purpose and they were like reimagining it. Oh, that gear could be the eye, or that could be the this, and these wires can be the hair. So I felt like my kids were really sort of developing their sense of imagination.
Yes.
So I guess I'm kind of wondering from you, like, is that a similar skill that you saw your students develop when you worked with donated kind of trash items?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing that they get out of it is, like I mentioned, back at the beginning of the conversation, just the problem solving skills and the creativity that comes along with that, because so much of creativity is, making new connections between things that already exist. And like you said, when you're forced to look at these things in a new way and you're forced to repurpose them, it really does develop that creative thinking. And what I love about it is it's, a lot of these things are just outside of my normal curriculum. Like, these are things that I would never plan to do, that I wouldn't expect my kids to do. But yet, because of these donations, because of these materials that come in, we have all of these new opportunities. And I think it's really important to kind of embrace that, because it does such a great job of developing, creativity, problem solving, all those types of thinking skills that we always want our kids to do. And so if we really do embrace that and kind of build our projects around those donated materials, that's one of the best things we can do to develop those skills that, every teacher thinks are so vital.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think we're convincing people to, open up the doors and let the trash flow in and accept yes. some weird stuff. And it's great for your students, and it gets them thinking differently and deeply. Let's spin this to the sort of opposite end of this horror spectrum and say, okay, you've been teaching and you have a pile of crap that you haven't touched for like 15 years and you're turning in to a hoarder. I mean,
so like your classroom.
No, mine's not that bad. I've been downsizing some stuff, and my teaching history is I have never stayed anywhere longer than 4 or 5 years, so I can never build up that big of an arsenal of stuff. I just leave it for the next person after me.
I'm sure they love it.
Oh yeah. I left a giant box filled with about like 60 pairs of women's flip-flops.
What?
They're all like size 10, because they were like, buy 4 pairs of flip-flops for 25 cents. I was like, I can do something with this. I just bought
I have $10.
Yeah,
get so many flip-flops.
I know I left that for the next guy behind me, and I'm sure he's just like scratching his head like, what the heck, But so how do you know when to pull the trigger and get rid of something?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think when you look around and notice that you have 60 pairs of flip-flops, it's time to start getting rid of things. But no, like I said, I think there are some things that you can get rid of immediately, but other things, when you have them in the maybe pile, I think if they've sat there for a couple years and you've had a couple groups of students kind of come through and nobody has a real good idea of what they want to do with it and no lessons are coming to you, I would say just go ahead and get rid of it. Like if it's been sitting there long enough that you think to yourself, oh, nobody's used that in a while, then it's probably time to get rid of that. Maybe give it one last hurrah, say, hey guys, I have all this stuff here. Think about it for sculpture, think about it for drawing, whatever the case may be, and give them one last chance to go at it and maybe use what they can, what they want, and whatever doesn't get used, it's probably time to get rid of. And if you do that, every couple of years, I think you can keep from collecting or hoarding too much stuff that's never going to be used.
Yeah, but you know what's going to happen. The day you throw that away, the next day you're going to see this like awesome project on Pinterest where it's like, I needed those 60 pair of flip-flops. I finally know the perfect thing. So that's my worry is like the day I throw something away, I'm going to come up with a really good idea the following day.
Yeah, Andrew, I think, that is step one in identifying a hoarder. Like that attitude right there is like, can't get rid of this. I could use it someday. Just that fear of like missing out on the great opportunity. Like you just need to accept it. You need to embrace the fact that you get rid of this and, maybe you missed an opportunity that's better than, your room filling with crap. So I would say you just need to accept that you might miss out on something and be willing to kick some stuff to the curb.
Yeah, and in the last couple of years, I've done a better job of kind of like, c'est la vie, like it comes, it goes. Mm-hmm. I'll let go of some junk and some new junk will come in and like fill its place. So, man, I want to thank you. I feel like in the year or so that we've been doing this podcast, I think you've really helped me kind of cleanse and purge a little bit of my room. So I appreciate that.
I hope so.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good talking to you.
So I mentioned at the top, sometimes Tim and I like to joke I'm a little bit of a hoarder, but I'm not really that bad. And as I've been focusing more and more on building routines for my students and building up my organizational repertoire, I have fewer and fewer big old weird piles laying around. Now, I'll never be like Tim, but I mean, come on, Tim's a little bit of a neat freak. What I can say in parting is, stay open, stay creative with what materials you ask for and what materials you accept, but do have a shelf life for your stuff. Like Tim said, if it's been years, maybe give it one more shot and then perhaps share the holiday spirit and just re-gift it to some other art teacher in the district. Just make sure to use your campus mail if possible. There's nothing like shipping a big box of flip-flops to another school in the district, right? Art Ed Radio is developed, produced, and supported by the Art of Education with audio engineering by Michael Crocker. For all you AOE fans out there, make sure you head on over to theartofed.com and hurry up and register for the upcoming Art Ed Now conference. Join thousands of your favorite Art Ed peeps from around the world, and you will have access to some of the greatest presentations by some of the biggest names in art education. I'm really excited for Jessica Balsley's talk on life hacks for visual people. I think I can use all the hacks I could get. So head on over and sign up for the Art Ed Now conference, and while you're there, you can dig through some of the older podcasts that Tim and I have put together. As always, new episodes of Art Ed Radio are released every Tuesday, and additional content can be found under the podcast tab on theartofed.com. Thanks for listening.